Hi everyone, I'm Annalisa from C.A.C. Global Solutions. I'm here with Brett for another episode of our podcast, Aviation Perspectives with C.A.C. And today we are going to talk about the Airworthiness Review Certificate process. And we are going to do that with a very special guest. His name is Michael Byrt, and he's the Chief Operations Officer at AerAdvise. Mike, welcome, and thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Anastasia. Thank you.
Okay, so Mike, I would like to start every interview talking about a little bit the person that we have in front because I'm curious to know
Mhm.
why they got into aviation and what was their path. So, what was your path? Why? How did you start in aviation?
Okay. Thanks, Annalisa. My aviation career started with Shannon Aerospace in 1992. I had already trained as an electrician in the industry, in the trade, and in our area around that time, one of the most exciting projects that lifting off was Shannon Aerospace, which was going to be a heavy maintenance facility um, co-owned by GPA at the time, Lufthansa and Swissair. And this was the big news in our area, and everybody wanted to be a part of that. So they advertised for aircraft maintenance technicians. Um, they had a new approach whereby they could fast track people who were already qualified electricians to a shortened course. We did a 2-year program, and I joined that, and as that was the beginning of my introduction to aviation, and then that was fairly intense until it was a 2-year program, and we were out in time for the opening of the facility in September 1992. And
Wow.
yeah, it was pretty full on at the time, which was, you know, it's 35 years recently. The 35-year anniversary was celebrated recently, and people were amazed at, how that happened in such a short period of time, and the number of people that it's produced that are still in the aviation industry and in kind of leading roles in the aviation industry now in Ireland and in the leasing industry in particular. The Traditionally, the authority was fed by the Air Corps or the Aer Lingus, was a traditional feeder into the industry, and now suddenly Shannon Aerospace has become that. So now we're the old fogies in the industry. So Shannon Aerospace was my introduction to it. So joined there, and as I say, 1992 was the opening. We were full on there until I moved from production into training in 97, 98, and then I left Shannon Aerospace in 99 to join Transair, which was an airline based in Dublin as a quality inspector. Um, then I moved through quite a few jobs after that, to be honest. Virgin Express was next. That was an exciting startup in Shannon. Um, that was an offshoot of the Virgin Express in Brussels. They wanted to start
Mm.
an Irish operation. And at this time, this was kind of the beginning of the Ryanair low-cost carrier model. Virgin Express was going to be the big one in Europe, but it was quickly overtaken by Ryanair. After that, I was an independent consultant then for a while on deliveries and redeliveries. Was a quality manager at Skynet Airlines. And then Skynet Airlines lasted about 2 years, and then we were back on the road again as a consultant, doing deliveries, redeliveries. And I was contacted by a pilot friend of mine then to look after a business jet for a well-known Irish businessman. And at that time, he was putting the aircraft on the UK register. So we're now up to 2006, 2007, and CAMO was just coming in. So this was
Mhm.
the regulation was just being introduced around that time, and he decided he'd put the aircraft on the UK register. The aircraft was based in Enniskillen, which is in Northern Ireland, but it comes under the UK jurisdiction. And so we were reporting to the CAA in that case. And to be honest, at the time, the UK CAA were very positive towards the independent CAMO. They had road shows, they had information days, and they were extremely positive. On the other hand, the Irish Aviation Authority in south of the border was kind of taking the approach, well, that's our job. We'll be looking after that. We won't be giving that job away. But the UKCA were very positive about the introduction of camo. So then we had to go and learn about it, obviously, and we set up the Quinn Aviation as CAMO under the UK office. We were out of the Scottish office. They were our inspectors, and Sterling were coming over to inspect us, and we got our approval. So it was all new. That was all new at the time. And then, of course, in order to do that, you have to read the regulations, don't you? So we were finding out more and more as we read the regulations, and I could see that was spilling over into the leasing industry. So the requirement for an owner or operator to his responsibility for the continuous airworthiness management meant when the aircraft came off of one operator, it had to be managed throughout the lease. So here was an opportunity opening up for independent CAMOs to manage aircraft through that transition. So eventually the penny dropped, and we realized there was an opportunity here for a new type of service provider. And so I formed a company called Part M Aviation, and we were the first independent CAMO then to take this on, and we offer that service, and that went really well. So we got great support from the Irish lessors. Most of the, as you know, Ireland is a real hotbed of leasing, and we got great support. So that went very well. And after that went really well, I was there. We formed that, I think, 2012. We formed Part M, and so we sold that business in 2017. And after that, I joined Atlantic Aviation. I was there for 4 years as tech director. More same stuff again. We had a CAMO in that business as well, and then I moved on from there, well, I think 4 years ago, and I've been with AerAdvise since then. So
Wow,
that's a
that is very
long-winded way of how we got as far as here. But yeah, but to be honest, I suppose I got on um, the CAMO world really was introduced coming in 2006. We were really lucky to get a great introduction and training into it through the UK C.A.A. They were really supportive of it, and so we've been on that train since the beginning, if you like, and so we've watched that. And it has been, it is a niche area. It's not for everybody. Even though every AOC has to have their own CAMO, but the independent, it's quite a tricky business to introduce a new regulation and set out criteria for airworthiness review staff, and then say that they need 2 years experience, but they haven't. We've only just rolled out the requirements. So where are you going to get the 2 years? So
Yeah, right,
it was quite a little bit of dancing, and flexibility and support from the regulators and understanding of it, and we built up a good level of trust with the inspectors and the authorities in order to do that. We weren't always correct, as Brett will point out. We weren't always correct, but I would say we worked honestly on it, and that has served us well. We've made mistakes along the way, but we've learned a lot from them as well. We've added so primarily we're in the EASA approved organization, and with all the companies, but then on the back of that we have Cayman, Bermuda. We hold 2 reg approval as well, and then we'd also manage aircraft for Aruba, San Marino, Isle of Man, really, and we can probably get most of the regulators covered off that people want to use, basically. Yeah.
Right. So with managing aircraft in so many different jurisdictions, how do you manage the training? Like, do you provide training on each regulation set for the aircraft that you're managing? How does it work?
Yeah, I guess. Well, we're getting cut out on that recently, Brett. Funny you should mention that, because basically our guys are trained to the EASA CAME, our own exposition, and then for each regulator, then we have supplements. So the supplement then shows the differences and the requirements and the different forms we use, the different application forms, etc., etc. So the guys will be trained across the using the supplements for the other regulators. Basically, that's it. But it's hard to come by, to be honest. there is training available from some of the providers in Europe on the various jurisdictions, for example, on the OTARs. It is available, but it, again, is very niche. And what we've done in the past for that, Red, as well, is we've linked up with some of the other independent CAMOs. So when we get some training available, we'll pull. We can't let everybody off training, on a day. So we'll pool the training with the other companies as well. But there is a real need for that training as well, and gathering in the other organizations as well to benefit from that training when it is set up. Like we could set up a training for OTAR training for our own team, but like for the instructor, it would be just as easy to have 12 in the classroom as opposed to we'd only put 1 or 2 or maybe 4, but and everybody benefits from that as well.
Yeah. So I'm curious, Mike. It was interesting listening to your bio because I've also moved around quite a bit throughout my career. I've never stayed still. It's been some time, 43 years plus. But I find that moving around like that, you gain a lot of various experiences, right? You learn so much along the way. And I mean, I nowadays, not too many people stay at one job for 30, 40 years. And I, in some respects, I admire that. But in other respects, I mean, I've worked in quality and in manufacturing and airlines and flight schools and you name it, I've done it, right? So you get such a broad perspective of how things work and how to do it. But I'm curious, like it sounds very much like my story as well, where I hadn't really intended on getting into aviation. And it wasn't something that I thought about when I was in school and graduated. And I didn't hear you say that you dreamt about being in aviation your whole life. So how did that start?
True. That's quite true, actually. I suppose, Brett, going back to the time, we're going back to the mid '80s, late '80s in Ireland. We were in a fairly deep recession at that time. Work was quite scarce and in every area, and I guess the draw for me, the attraction for me, started with the ad for Shannon Aerospace, to be honest. And that was something new, exciting. It was a big building. It was going to be built, and there was going to be training provided, etc., etc. So prior to that, I had no notion of, no ambitions for the aviation industry, to be honest with you. So I had ambitions in other areas, but not in aviation. And it was a surprise to me that, but like we've seen recently as well, in Ireland, pharmaceutical is quite a strong industry, and we have the pharma industry actively recruiting aviation trained personnel. So they really like them, and they directly target them in their advertising for their own maintenance people in the facilities, because they like they know the type of person that they're getting in. They know the training they've had. They know they're strong on procedures. They're conscious of safety, etc., etc. But they've actually specifically mentioned, B1, B2 qualified and licensed engineers as their target group. Yeah, and the pharma industry then, of course, is it's more attractive for a lot of people as well. And and funnily enough, as you mentioned that, Brett, I stay involved with training as well, and I'm on the committee, the skillness committee for the steering committee on skillness for designing the training requirements for the country, and they talking to the guys that are heavily involved in training and promoting it. They're saying for the first time now they're beginning to see aviation is no longer an attractive industry for kids.
Yeah.
Like when they do roadshows and that, and previously, aviation was a really, star career path. Now they're saying that's gone. It's seen now. It's cheap. It's cheap and nasty, and it's long hours. And it's
when you've got different industries poaching the people or enticing them away from aviation, and I'm presuming that wages are not that great. I mean, I'm thinking pharma probably pays better than aviation.
Oh yes,
Is that part of it?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's part
Okay.
of it is the pay and the hours as well and the conditions. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean,
Mhm,
prior to starting here, we were talking about the travel
mhm,
involved, and I
mhm,
mean,
mhm.
half my career, I dreamt about travel. In the second half of my career, I dreamt about staying home. You know,
Yes, yeah,
so
yeah.
it's you have to be careful what you
Yeah.
wish for too,
I
right?
know. Yeah,
But
I'm similar as well. But for holidays, as you're probably the same. I prefer to stay at home.
yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I've
I do
gotten
not
that
want to
way.
see a
Yeah,
hotel. No, no, no,
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I know
for
not.
sure.
Yeah, which isn't always helpful. But anyhow, but yeah, but it is interesting. I suppose the industry has to change as well and has to adapt to the competition really,
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
and pharma for us is the big competitor here. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Mhm,
I'd just like to, because we're talking about this, just to add a point that I think is
mhm,
important for anybody considering getting into the industry. Um, it's such an interesting and
Yeah.
vast industry that there's never a dull moment. There's never
Mhm.
a day where you're repeating the same job, very seldom, where you're doing something exactly like you did the day
Mhm.
before. And everything is new, everything's interesting, and you learn something every day. So if you're interested in getting into the industry and you like change and you like to see things happen, it's definitely I don't know if pharma would be the same. I think I picture is sitting and going over numbers and
mhm.
you know
Mhm.
a lot of repetitive things,
Yes,
where
yeah, and,
this certainly
it's
isn't
very
that.
true. But because I do quite a bit of interviewing of young graduates and engineers coming into the industry as well, and I love hearing them say, well, I'm a little bit older now. I'm actually 22, and I finished my training, and I say listen, Sonny, you're just beginning, like
Yeah.
it's now become it's lifelong learning now. And that's one of the great things about the aviation industry. It is continuous learning. I love when I get pinged to say, Mike, your human factors is expired. You need to renew your training, and you have to set aside half a day to renew your human factors training. It's continuous. It's continuous
Yeah.
learning. It's lifelong learning, really, and which is a great
Yeah.
part of it. I can't imagine an industry where you wouldn't do that, or you wouldn't develop, or you wouldn't evolve, or things don't change, and we have to keep up with the changes all the time.
Yeah,
Uh,
for sure.
that's a fabulous part of the industry, isn't it? That there's always something
Yeah.
new. We've just added or we'll be adding the A220 onto our approvals. Another aircraft type. It's always exciting. It's new,
Yeah.
and yes, never exactly to your point, Brett. Never 2 days the same, and there's always something new. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just great.
Sure.
Mike, I have a question for you.
Oh, yes.
It's
I'm in
easy.
trouble. I
Don't
know
worry
that I'm
about
in trouble now.
it. Oh no, she got a question. So it sounds like you had different posts, different positions in different companies. So you started as an engineer, and then you went to quality manager, and then into CAMO management. So did you find any difficulties in going from a mechanic to a quality manager, a CAMO person?
Yeah.
Because we see a lot of aircraft maintenance engineer coming into the CAMO world, and
Mhm.
sometimes they go, "Oh, gee, this is different. I have to, reset my mindset and learn new things."
Yes. Well, yeah, I get your question, and Lisa, and I suppose the challenge for me was moving from, when I moved into the quality area, um,
Mm.
I was like, oh, it was just easier to go out and fix it myself than, right? Go and do an inspection, arrange an audit, write up a report, have a finding, try and get the finding closed. Now that doesn't close the finding. Now we've got to reissue it again. Now, there was 10 steps it suddenly
Mhm.
appeared where one step I could have just walked out there and fixed it.
Yeah.
Um, that I think that was difficult I found that frustrating that to 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 try and see. I suppose we all like to think our work should be worthwhile, you know.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And if you're in a quality position and you're seeing the same issues reappear, you think, "Oh, what am I doing? Is this not working?" And
Yeah.
whatever the problem is, like just fix it. And if you're not expanding the service of quality to making fundamental changes that prevent things happening again, then maybe you're not being effective, you know. So I found that frustrating, to be honest. Now I don't know whether people were just winding me up or not, but it was, you know, you'd see the same mistakes over and over again, and you know, the having an effective quality system was quite a challenge. You know, in a lot of ways. And then you feel, you know, a lot of effort goes into that. A lot of people put a lot of work into trying to effect change, and then you see just silly things happening. And you say, "Oh, yeah, come on, come on, guys," you know. And it was some, as I say, I found that frustrating in the quality world, if you like. And I suppose, you know, people, different authorities take on different approaches and different roles. That's why we're very fond of the Cayman approach to quality and oversight, and how they collaborate within the process. You know, like I in some ways I'm comparing the quality system with the oversight and the regulator. Um, you know, but they are linked in the sense that you can take a quality approach of being like a sniper in the distance, waiting for somebody to make a mistake and pick him off, or you can get involved in the process, you know. And I love the way the Cayman, Brett, are collaborative and get involved in the process of what's happening, rather than telling the doer of deeds what he's done wrong at the end, you know. And quality for me was a lot like that as well. I felt like you were hands off. You couldn't be part of the process. You weren't independent. um, so then you would watch them make the mistake, then you would write up the finding, and then try and get them to fix it, you know. uh, Probably not for me. I think that area of the business, I would find that frustrating, and probably, no, I wouldn't say it's not a waste of time, but I felt it was frustrating,
Yeah,
when you're not seeing progress. And I don't know, does that resonate with you, Brett, or does that sound
oh, for
familiar?
sure, for sure. I mean,
Mm,
I work quality in a commercial environment as well, and I found it challenging to take on a role that where you're responsible for identifying people's downfalls, you know, and to be able to convey those to the people that need to address them in an effective manner without sounding critical, you know what I
mhm.
mean? Because findings, people typically take a finding as getting a ticket from a policeman, where
Yeah, yeah,
you know
yeah,
it's really not that. It's
yeah,
in my mind, it's a tool that you should be using to try to make things better. You know, to you can't always see what you're doing. A lot of
mhm,
times you need an outside
Mhm.
pair of eyes to see what's happening. But the challenge is conveying that. And if you can't
mhm,
convey it effectively, you got a problem, because it'll, like you say, you keep seeing the same thing over and over and over. But from a regulator's perspective, I agree with you. My approach has always been that I like to collaborate with the clients, but you have to be careful. There's a fine line between becoming complicit and collaborating, because and this is something that you're taught early on as a regulator, that you can't give the answer. You can't tell anybody what the fix is, because if you do and something goes wrong, now you can be held liable as well, right? Or
of
the
course.
authority can be held liable. So you have to keep the independence and keep the distance, but at the same time, if you can for instance, throw out examples of how a good way of doing something might be, and that person can pick any one of them, or come up with their own rendition of a combination of that, then you've succeeded. And what I find most rewarding is if you go into an organization that everybody can see has problems, and you can collaborate with them, and over time you see changes where things are now becoming more and more positive. You can't get any better than that. I think
Yeah,
it's great.
yeah. And interesting, yeah, I agree 100% with you. But and I suppose I tie, and I think I tie quality and the regulator together, because when the regulator comes to talk to the airline or the independent CAMO, they're talking to the quality and safety system, management system now. But Yeah, it can be challenging for sure.
Yeah.
I did an exercise there where we've rolled out the SMS now in the last couple of years, and
Mhm.
again it's an additional investment. It's an additional cost to every organization, and it's extremely difficult to um, make the case financially for increased safety management.
Well,
It's almost in reverse that, yeah, well, if it goes wrong, well, then we know what the cost is. But if it keeps getting better, how do we know we're getting value for money? Because it's a constant
well,
strive for
yeah,
safety. It just
yeah,
has to be constant. So there has to be constant investment. But the argument could be from the CEO say, well, as we have a quality system, we have a safety management system. Why do we need to? That's working. Why do we need to spend more? Why does it have to take
yeah.
more resources to do
Well,
this? It's a very difficult case to make.
yeah. When I was with Transport Canada, I went into one commercial air operator and did an SMS assessment. And the CEO of this airline, he was totally sold on it. It was top down. This is what they do. This is how they do it. And when they showed us what they were doing, I have to say it was impressive. And he was telling us that they actually save money. Their insurance rates have been reduced, and there are all kinds of benefits that come from it. I mean, as one quick example, they would do if they were taking on a new route, they would have a flight go in and they would video everything, and then any of the pilots that might be flying that route would watch this video, so they would know the approaches, they would know the terminal when they got there, where to go to clear customs, and all of these different things. And he said it was just a magical thing. It just worked, and you
Yes,
could see
yeah,
it. It was
yeah.
measurable.
Like you get the benefits from it, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I
No,
turned
no,
into
that's
there.
We got
very,
off on a
very
tangent,
interesting.
Emily. So
Yeah,
yeah, sorry.
No, that's very interesting. I think a lot of people will find this very interesting because it applies
Mm,
to many, many people or professionals and operators,
yeah.
right? But
And
I
you,
would like,
mhm,
no, please
sorry,
go
Emily. So yeah,
ahead.
but you would say also the most enjoyable work has been training. I've always enjoyed
Right.
the classroom.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. That is really enjoyable. I'm not sure the students always enjoyed it, but I always enjoyed it. I think
yeah.
that's the nicest part of the industry that we're in, and I spent a couple of years doing that, and I really enjoyed that. I think that's worthwhile.
That's actually even as a regulator, it's not considered training, but if I go into a facility and I can help somebody understand why they need to do what they're supposed to do, and
Mhm.
I can see the light bulb moment, and then as soon as they realize why they're supposed to do what they need to do, it it's quite rewarding because now all of a sudden they're on the same page and they can share it with other people as well, and they can kind of
Yeah.
bring everybody together. I quite enjoy that.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's an area of our industry that needs a lot of attention to, but the overall the training, and you alluded to earlier from the regulators as well, but it's in all areas. It's very
Hmm.
ragged, I think.
Yeah.
It's confused. It's very and it's quite difficult to explain to anybody outside the industry. It's become extremely complex. The different routes into the qualifications, the different qualifications.
Yeah.
There's the college route, there's the apprenticeship route, there's a traineeship, there's so many courses, so many options, and it's become a nightmare really. And then behind all of that, there's a lack of training, you know.
Yeah.
And in,
Hmm.
in Ireland now, we're starting to get to grips with it and starting to push apprentices through at scale, because we've had to go outside the country for a lot of the skill sets. So now we're back
Yeah.
to getting apprentices pushed through the system, and hiring big numbers. But that's only
You know,
happened this year.
you bring up a point, and we just actually did an interview with a professor from a technical institute in Latvia, and he was talking about the difference between what's regulated and what's required or needed in the industry right now. And I think that kind of speaks a little bit to what you're talking about as well, in that there's
Mm,
not enough training because um, regulations to get a license, you have to have these different courses, and depending where you are, there are some differences. But what you need to do actually do your job, like to be a camo engineer,
mhm.
there's very few places out there that teach how to read an type certificate data sheet and what the relevance is, or building a maintenance program or monitoring recurring defects or any of those things, right? Like they just don't teach you that in a technical school for maintenance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this
Yeah.
is what we're trying to do with all of these things, the podcast and the other episode that we are doing with Storytime with Brett. I don't know if you are aware or not, but we do every month a little, he talks about a little story, something that happened in the past, like you were talking to us before this interview, because there are a lot of things that can be learned and a lot of things that, again, they are not in a textbook and they are not in a course or in a university course. So, and it's free. I mean, it's on YouTube, so everybody can go there
Yes.
and check those things out. It's not going to solve every single problem that we have in aviation, but it's certainly a starting point.
What exactly, Annalisa, and I suppose we've been talking about that recently with the hybrid working model as well. When a lot of our team are working remotely, they're working at home, they're at a huge loss for that type of information, that information that the yarns, the stories, the learnings from other people's experiences. You're not going to get that if you're isolated. You have to be part of the community and plugged into the community to benefit from that. Maybe as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I was just actually involved in facilitating a training session, and these were people that had been working remote for some time, basically since COVID, and they were all convinced that what they were doing was great. And well, I shouldn't say that, but they were all convinced that what they were doing was working. And I won't for a second say that it wasn't, but when we all came together and we started discussing things, there was input from everybody. And there were some people saying, well, I find it works better if you do this, and I find it works better if you do that. And well, no, you shouldn't do that because, but when you're working in isolation, you don't get that, right? And in my mind, a lot of really good information came from those sessions. So I think it's important for, like you say, people to come together and kind of share the experiences.
Yes, yeah, for sure. I know the move has started here. Definitely, I mean, people are starting to move from the home office now back into the work office because it's presenting a huge challenge for organizations as well. The people are paying expensive office space. It's not being used. So they're paying additional charges. So it does cause problems, and there is. And we have to give great flexibility in our industry because we expect people to travel and we expect people to leave home for a week. So you can't be, the time lord on the clock-in machine, at 8 o'clock in the morning if you're expecting people to be flexible with you. So we give great flexibility as well. But I do think the benefit to the individual, is underestimated. That they really would benefit more because, if they if for any reason they want to change jobs or they move on somewhere else, they've lost all of that connection to the other people in other companies that they would meet casually. The stories that they overhear in the office or who's gone where or who's met who or who's joined another organization. All that information isn't there, and there's the wider information, I guess, is being missed out on. Yeah.
So I would like to dig into our topic of today, and I would like to ask you if you can explain what is an ARC and if you can provide an outline of the ARC program.
Sure. Yeah. Well, that's a part of our that's part of our bread and butter as an independent CAMO here to provide ARC recommendations for our clients. So basically, the ARC recommendation is an Airworthiness Review Certificate. Basically, with the aircraft, once it goes on an EASA register, it will get a non-expiring C of A, first of all, which it's a new concept. The non-expiring C of A has to be validated by the ARC, basically. So when the aircraft comes on the register, you get a certificate of registration and you get a non-expiring C of A, but that doesn't allow you to fly at that point. Basically, the non-expiring C of A is the statement that the aircraft is in compliance with its type certificate. Basically, that's to begin with. But in order to operate the aircraft, then that C of A is validated with the ARC. So this is the main difference between EASA and other regulators. So the ARC then is a document that has a validity of it's issued and it has a validity of 3 years, really. So it can be extended twice. So after the first year, provided the aircraft has remained in a controlled environment, the ARC can be extended. So a controlled environment then is that it has been in the same management for the preceding 12 months, and it has been maintained by 145. So you can extend that twice, and then you reissue the ARC again. So you can also have, depending on your organization approval, of course, the authority can issue the ARC, or the airline can issue the ARC, or you can ask for the ARC to be issued by, we can make a recommendation to the authority for them to issue the ARC as well.
All right.
So it is quite a complex arrangement in that sense, and quite difficult to explain. There are basically two scenarios. Then you've got an aircraft that moves internally within EASA, which we call a 901. It's an internal transfer, and then you've got an import from outside of EASA, from a third country that's inbound. So they're treated slightly differently in that the EASA aircraft is considered, it's already in the circle of trust, if you like, and sampling of the paperwork is allowed, where an aircraft that's coming from outside isn't in the circle of trust, so it gets a 100% review of the records. So just treated slightly differently. So an import is more expensive basically than an EASA transfer. We'd like to charge, we can charge more for that because there's more work involved. Typically, for us, we're talking about a full review of the aircraft records. It also requires a physical inspection by the ARC signatory. You have to do a physical inspection of the aircraft to ensure that it matches the records basically, and that's carried out by the ARC signatory. We don't need the regulator on site for that. And typically it's a 10-day process. We allow 10 days for the total process. Typically 8 for the records review and 2 days for the physical. So that's typically what it takes for us.
Okay.
So have I confused you completely, Annalisa, or would you like to be confused?
No, that's perfect.
Well,
I think we have a few questions.
Yeah, I've got a few questions. And I'm going to be doing this probably throughout a little bit, Mike, because
Sure.
I before I joined Transport Canada, I was what Transport Canada refers to as a minister's delegate for maintenance, which I believe is somewhat along the same lines as an ARC signatory, but not entirely. So one of the questions I have is, so the initial ARC is good for 3 years, right? And now, would an ARC signatory be signing that ARC, or would this be just a recommendation to the authority to issue the ARC?
Yeah, it depends. If your organization holds approval, you can hold the authority to issue the ARC, or you can also hold the approval just to make recommendations. So basically, we hold the approval to make recommendations. Now we've had CAMO approval in the past where we could issue the ARC, but right now we just issue ARC recommendations, and then the authority will issue the ARC. Now that's the way the Irish Aviation Authority, who are our regulator, want it set up, and they maintain their control in that sense. So in some ways, you see the CAMO, independent CAMO, is being viewed as, is it a way of the authority offloading some of their work? So this, by us allowing us to make the recommendation, then the authority have the last word on actually issuing the ARC then as well. So we make the recommendation to the IEA, for example, or to whatever the registry, EASA register is, and the register then will issue the ARC.
Okay. So sorry. So you said this is how the IAA works. So would you happen to know, with other EASA states, do they work the same way, where a CAMO might make the recommendation, or they may issue the ARC? Or
yes, it is possible. It is allowable that the CAMO can issue the ARC as well. Okay. That is allowed. Yeah.
So with this process, does it mean that the time when the authority goes out and survey physically the aircraft is gone, is done? They don't go out?
Well, it's not entirely, because with the Irish Aviation Authority, for example, if an aircraft comes on the register at some point, particularly for a transition aircraft, at some point we look for an export, possibly off the register again. At some point in the timeline, the authority will want to see the aircraft, either inbound or outgoing, but they do reserve the right to see the aircraft. And in fairness, most times the Irish Aviation Authority will do that. They will see the aircraft, usually at export. But they will see the aircraft. It's not, they haven't completely absolved their involvement. They stay very much involved, and they will see the aircraft at some point in the transaction.
Okay, so with the ARC signatory, the ARC is only required in support of a certificate of airworthiness. So this has nothing to do with an export certificate, does it?
Correct. Yeah, correct. Now, I guess the only involvement it has, I suppose, but in the sense that if you want an export, you should have a C of A, and
Right.
if you have a C of A, then you need the C of A validated with the ARC. So sometimes we would do the ARC recommendation, and then immediately the aircraft would be exported afterwards.
Okay.
So I have a question, and this is going to lead us to the next question that we have, that is about who can issue an ARC. But let's say that I am in a EASA CAMO, and you guys are in EASA CAMO, but you don't have ARC staff, and you don't have that process in place, but I do. Can you ask me to do the review for you, and then you send it to the authority?
Yes, and we have done that. Yeah, that is allowable, and it happens. So you may not have, you may not have the staff. We've done it for other independent CAMOs where for example, they may have lost an individual, their ARC signatory who was on a particular aircraft type, so they had nobody on that type, so they would have to request us to go and do that aircraft for them then. And that does happen, and that is allowable. One of the little quirky things that has happened recently is we have a customer that's an AOC, and they have the authority, they have the approval to issue ARCs, but they contract the work to us, and they contract it to us. So we do it under our approval. But the authority doesn't like that. If you have the approval, they want you to use it as well. So I guess the authority feel that if they're going to the trouble of issuing an approval, you should be using it as well. That you shouldn't be farming it out, I guess. So
a question, Mike, with because right now you're with the CAMO that manages aircraft on different registers. Is it possible that or does the EASA require the CAMO in order to maintain your ARC signatory approval or ARC approval? Are you required to manage an EASA aircraft, or do they accept that you might not be managing any EASA aircraft? You may just be managing, for instance, overseas territories aircraft.
That's a very good question, Brett, because we've come quite close to that, and it has happened that we have had no EASA aircraft on our managed fleet, and only, as we call them, third country aircraft. That has happened, yes.
Okay, and they're okay with maintaining your EASA approval in that manner?
Yes, is the answer. Yeah, for now. Anyway, yeah. No, I would say, that could cause problems if that went on for too long. I would imagine that would cause an issue, because then it may be, they may be concerned that they're facilitating third countries and not supporting EASA, and I would say that wouldn't be sustainable for too long. But it has happened that we've had no EASA aircraft on our books, on our managed fleet, and it was all third country aircraft. But that has only happened for a short period of time. But no, to be honest, we mentioned it to the inspectors; they weren't concerned. I think that would be probably, a strategic question that would be asked at a higher level that would take too long to get down to the truth. You know, but it's a very good, it's a very good point, and we would be slightly concerned ourselves, and say, well, hang on now, our mainline approval here is EASA, and particularly Irish Aviation, an EI registered aircraft, and if we don't have those, will they? Well, first of all, when our renewal comes up, what aircraft are we going to select for the audit? We don't really want the Irish Aviation Authority picking another registered aircraft for the audit. Really.
Well, I kind of liken it to, in that respect, to the Transport Canada Minister's delegation, in that in order to obtain your delegation, you have to provide 3 sample aircraft, but they have to be Canadian registered aircraft. And if you don't have that, I mean, you can't, for instance, sample a Cayman Islands aircraft or an Irish aircraft. They just don't meet the requirement.
Yes.
Partially because you have to verify type certification, and they will be on those registers under a different type certification. So, but I'm curious, because I know under EASA, I mean, of course, basically every state has their own authority. So we've experienced where some authorities, although the rules, EASA rules, are being applied across the board, interpretation of those is slightly different in different states. For instance, we know that, if an aircraft's been managed by an EASA CAMO and it goes to another state that has an EASA CAMO, in theory, it should just be accepted. But we had a friend that had some aircraft come into Italy from another EASA state that were not being accepted because of some of the work that had been done on the engines, right? So I'm curious, with the ARC, I mean, they're supposed to be accepted by all. Your EASA ARC should be accepted by all other EASA states. Is that right?
Correct. And what will happen in that case is, say we have a transfer of an aircraft within EASA. What will happen? Say the aircraft is on the Lithuanian register, the Latvia register, and it transfers onto the Irish register, and the ARC has some time left on the ARC. For example, the ARC hasn't expired, so there's a live ARC in it. What will happen is, when the registration change happens, they will use the existing ARC, and the old registration will be crossed out, and the new registration will be handwritten onto the ARC. So that's the EASA transfer. But we do a transfer, we do a 901 recommendation for that, and then the ARC transfers to the new register. Okay. But you make a good point. I guess Europe is you've 26 states in EASA now. I mean, it's a lot of different cultures, organizations, outlooks, perspectives, and you're right, they're not all the same, for sure. And I guess you could be philosophical about that too, in the sense that, like, the older registers, like the Irish Aviation Authority is one of the older registers. That was set up a long time before CAMO was even thought of, really. With the Irish Aviation Authority, for example, when we applied for our approval originally back in 2008, for example, and in fairness, it was processed and we got our approval probably 2012, 2013, but it wasn't in the schedule. There was no provision in the schedule of fees for a charge for CAMOs. So they couldn't charge it. So it was for free, effectively. So we're going to have to change this, because it wasn't provided for in the schedule of fees. And the next schedule of fees order wasn't coming for another couple of years. When the schedule of fees order came in, of course, it was added. But, so the Irish Aviation Authority and their system and the structure was never there to facilitate independent CAMOs, really, in that sense. Whereas when you look at some of the newer entrance into the marketplace, like San Marino, for example, have come into the market with the advent of CAMO. Probably they're closely connected to P4 Aruba team, and they're specifically designed for transitions. So they have targeted that market as well. You know, like 2Reg targeted that market. That's a new register designed in its time, you know, with when CAMO was around. But the Irish Aviation Authority and the older authorities probably designed for your flag carrier, traditional airline. You know, it was a different model really at that time. So now the Irish Aviation Authority will move along. They're changing. They're going to go on an online system, etc., etc. But that takes time as well. But there are, for sure, there are preferences when people want to move aircraft. Some are preferred. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a question. You guys are an Irish CAMO, and obviously you manage and issue ARC for aircraft that are managed that are Irish registered, and that goes in and out from Ireland. But let's say that I have an aircraft that it's Italian registered in Italy, and it goes to Germany. Can you do, as an Irish company, the ARC? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. We can manage any aircraft on an EASA register as well.
All right.
So we can offer our customer, and that's often the discussion we have at the beginning of a project, is we'll discuss which register you want to use within EASA. So they can choose any register. So you know, for example, at the moment we have Bulgarian, we have Greek, we have Malta, we have Latvia, you know, we have various, but it does, they can choose whichever register they wish, really. Yeah. We're not restricted. Yeah.
Right.
We have an aircraft on the French register, and we have there will be EASA. We actually have no Irish registered aircraft at the moment.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. Again, but we would have EASA aircraft, but we've no Irish registered aircraft.
Okay.
It's again, it's you know, you have some authorities that are well clued into transitions, such as like Austria would be very strong in this market. Malta would be very strong in the market. They actively you know, pursue this market. You know, they go after the leasing companies, and they promote their register with them. They actively want it. You know, 2Reg would actively promote it. Whereas the other, you know, the other authorities, they don't go looking for the business, really. You know, they have enough to get on with their own day-to-day operations. You know, their Ryanairs, their Aer Linguses, you know, they've got enough work to do. They don't, like, we're just sometimes seen as a nuisance factor. You know, these guys coming in with their, you know, 3-week turnarounds or the 3-month turnaround aircraft. No, you know, and it's been pointed out to us once. This is not McDonald's, you know. It's not a quick turnaround. It's not like a takeaway service, you know. It's like so, you know,
well, you know, we did another. Well, actually, we wrote a book about managing aircraft, and in it we also talk about airworthiness authorities and the structures of the different airworthiness authorities. And some structures simply of state authorities simply don't lend themselves to this kind of activity, right? Because, you know, if, for instance, if you're an authority like the FAA or Transport Canada, where you're entirely, I mean, yes, they accept or they charge fees for different aspects, but by far they're funded by the taxpayer of Canada.
Of course.
So there's no appetite to provide services to any register, any person outside of Canada, even if they would have to become a Canadian entity, and then of course now they pay Canadian taxes and they become part of that group that has to be served. But otherwise, it's not a register of choice, so to speak.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so I would like to talk about qualifications. So what kind of qualification requirements an ARC person that can issue an ARC has to have?
Sure. Well, typically you need to have it's time really is a tricky requirement here, because it's 5 years experience is in a CAMO environment was very difficult to find when CAMO was very new. You know, so that's the big challenge, really. But then you need the training. You need training on the types. You know, you certainly need a type GenPAM training on a selection of the types that have been issued. Now, we don't restrict our ARC signatories to specific types. If you get your ARC approval here, you have approval on all types, and we do that by similarity as well. If you don't have the courses on a particular aircraft type, we do it by similarity. So we don't restrict our ARC signatories to individual types. The biggest challenge is the time. Obviously, the qualifications. Then you need the experience and the courses. You need your human factors. You need your EWIS training, all the usual suspects. And then once selected, you do an ARC under supervision. We have a process then for gaining your ARC approval, and that involves doing an ARC under supervision. So you basically tag along with an ARC that's happening. You do the full review, you do the physical inspection, and effectively it's a shadow ARC recommendation. So then we put a package together then of the training, the experience, the shadow, the ARC under supervision, and that's presented to the authority, and they may choose to interview the candidate. They reserve the right to interview the candidate then that we're putting forward. In some cases they do, which has been always very interesting. And then once the approval is granted, that was really by a revision to our exposition, where that individual then is added to our list of ARC signatories. So that would be the process for it. Then so at the moment we have 3 ARC signatories in our company, and but we could do it more because I could do with less travel myself. So we could always do with more ARC signatories. So yeah, that's the process. So the qualifications, typically they're coming from, either college educated engineers or licensed engineers would be the origin. Then building up the experience in airworthiness management, showing a relevant GenPAM courses, then of a sampling of the aircraft that we have. They don't have to have them all. Then the ARC under supervision, and all that package then getting into the authority, and then that's it. May result in an interview.
Okay.
I have a few questions that came from all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So the ARC signatory authority is issued to the organization. It's not issued to the individual. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
So if the individual leaves the organization.
Yeah, exactly, because for example, as you've seen from my checkered history there, like I've held ARC approval in all of those companies, but once I leave that company, that ARC approval expires, and I have to start again in the next organization and follow the procedures in that exposition to gain the ARC approval again. So it didn't travel with me, if you like. It died with when I left. It came out of their exposition. So it's an organizational. The individual is approved by the organization rather than the individual holding the approval. Yeah.
Right, but they're accepted by the authority.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So in along the same lines, is there such thing as an ARC signatory outside of any structured organization?
No, not that I'm aware of. No.
Okay.
You can hold. I could be an independent ARC signatory for an organization as an independent contractor, but either way, my name would have to go through the process of that organization in that exposition, and it would be that organization's approval. Even though if I could be an independent contractor to that organization, it's really still the organization's approval.
So technically, an independent person could contract to 2 different CAMOs and hold ARC approval under either of those CAMOs.
That's possible, but we had an instance recently now where an organization was looking to add one of our staff onto their approval, and the authority wouldn't allow it. Now, there's nothing in the regs that says you can't do that, but it wasn't that scenario wasn't accepted, if you like.
Okay.
I said too much.
It's a big question.
Well, because it came to mind that you mentioned earlier, even in this interview, that in some instances you may have a person from another CAMO go out and do something
Yes.
on behalf of your CAMO, but they would be signing, if it was a signatory aspect, they would be signing that aspect under whatever CAMO they're authorized under, right?
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another question. Well, okay, to qualify as an ARC signatory, do you have to hold an AME license?
No. No,
No?
it's
Okay.
no. You could come through we bring our team from two sources basically. They're the college educated aeronautical engineers, and from the AME feed as well. And we find a combination of those two is ideal. Actually, we find that the aeronautical engineer has the keyboard skills, the computing skills, and the AME has the aircraft knowledge. And if you could merge the two of those together and get them to work together as a team, then you have a solution, and they'd learn from each other. But yeah, we take them from those two sources. And in fact, for one of our team, it came through the aeronautical engineering role, and one through the AME role, and then two from the AME role, one from the aeronautical engineering. Now, I have to say, it's probably more difficult for the aeronautical engineer, a university graduate engineer, to come through that, because it's a more difficult interview if you go through the authority, because they would focus then on the actual aircraft, and there may not be a huge amount of exposure to the aircraft, and that's more difficult.
Okay. No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned you don't have to be type rated, but similar types. Now, I know what Transport Canada's similar types means. What exactly does that mean? And like, for instance, an Airbus. Would one Airbus product qualify you across the board?
Yes, by similarity, yes. So
Okay.
we'd be talking about the main differences, the huge differences, really, to be honest. We're talking about, the avionics suite being similar. So, for example, if we add the E195 to an existing, say you have the A320 approval, and you're adding the E195, for example, well, it's broadly similar aircraft. It's same philosophy. Now, if you trying to add an ATR 72 onto that person's approval, they say, well, hang on, that's too much of a stretch here. We've now it's completely different engine, completely different propulsion system, really. So that wouldn't jive, if you like. But if you did have the ATR 42, that would give you all the other props and turboprops, etc., as well. So in very broad terms. But then we don't have a huge selection of aircraft in our approval. Basically, it's the Airbus fleet, the Boeing fleet, without the 75, 76, and 777. And then we're getting into the E195s, the A220s. That area now there's a lot of interest in those aircraft.
Okay.
Okay.
So, do you have to do a number of ARC reviews in a year in order to keep your kind of certification?
Yes, but you have, and according to the regulations, but we also have a clause there to say that if you've been involved in aircraft maintenance management, that keeps you current. So we have a really get out of jail statement there that keeps you alive, which we might have had to use from time to time, because it's not always easy to schedule the inspections, for one reason or another, and sometimes we can go long periods without an ARC recommendation. So it is difficult to keep it current for everybody. So we have that clause there that, or you have to do so many in the preceding, one of the preceding 6 months or 12 months, or be involved in the management of aircraft in that time.
Yeah.
Right.
We've kind of got away with that for the moment. Could
Yeah.
get caught though, Brett. Can't be giving away all those secrets now, Brett.
I see that as a valid approach. I mean, I liken that to a Canadian AME license. As a regulator with Transport Canada, you cannot exercise your AME license, but you maintain it by being involved in the oversight of maintenance.
Yeah.
So,
and to that point, we maintain our licenses as well in that sense. And we were always thinking, when did you use it last? Well, we didn't really use it, but they do renew our licenses for us in that sense, because we are involved. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the ARC process being around 10 days, like 8 days for technical records review and a couple of days for the physical inspection. What did you guys do during COVID and lockdowns? Were you able to do the physical inspections?
Oh, it was quite a challenge, Annalisa, in a sense. Now there was a provision within the EASA, and this became quite controversial. EASA produced a letter that would allow a remote inspection. It would allow a CAMO to use an engineer at a remote location to carry out the inspection. Obviously with the full terms and conditions applied to it. And we had an example of that where we had an aircraft in Malta and we couldn't travel to that aircraft. So we were going to invoke that letter from EASA to allow us to use a local engineer to do and that involved basically, the training in your procedures, a video inspection, meetings, etc. All very doable, very, very sensible. And however, in order to use that clause, if you like, you had to have a procedure in your own exposition to allow you to use that procedure, use that letter, if you like. And we didn't have that procedure, and we weren't going to be allowed to have that procedure as well, so it didn't work for us. So what we ended up doing was flying the aircraft to another location for the inspection.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was tricky. And
Yeah. Well, and also I imagine trying to find somewhere, someone in a remote location that you can trust, like you said, that you have to train them. Wow, was quite demanding.
Yeah, but it's very possible, and the remote inspection is very doable, really. That because we always have people on site. We have there's always generally people available. That wasn't the challenge, really. The challenge was getting the procedures changed to allow us to use the letter. And and there's an example of where different authorities took a different view on that provision.
Right.
Some more restrictive than others, and that's what it is. It is what it is, and you work with the regulations in that sense, Whereas I would say Malta took a very liberal approach to that. Other jurisdictions didn't,
Yeah, a lot of people sometimes they ask, well, why does one regulator do it like this and the other will allow that? I mean, if you don't take into account what resources are available, for instance, I mean, and the oversight model, there could be a number of different reasons why they won't allow something or why they will, and you don't necessarily know what's happening in the background, right? So, and sometimes there are just some that are stickier than others, right? So,
Yes, yeah. And exactly to the point, because the one thing we found as well, but exactly to your point, like we have, we're very much like an opportune view of the aircraft in its life cycle. We just pop in during a transition, whereas the regulator is managing it throughout its life, and they may have a whole raft of other issues to pluck with the operator that we're not aware of. It's none of our business, and there's nothing to do with us. But so adding another aircraft into a fleet where the regulator may see as challenging for that operator. And we say, well, why is there so much resistance here? It's not. It may not have anything to do with us, but it may be that they've already have concerns about the capacity of the operator to manage what they have, besides adding additional aircraft into the fleet, etc., etc. So, yeah, there's often more at play than we can see.
for sure. It brings to mind one time I was setting up a flight school for this client, and he had some key personnel that he wanted to use for post holders. And Transport Canada simply would not accept this one post holder. He met all of the criteria, but they simply no way on earth, right? Well, it took me. I mean, of course, there's confidentiality as well, so they wouldn't share why he's not acceptable.
Yeah.
But it came out a couple of years later that he was under investigation for some criminal liabilities and such, and they just didn't want him in that position. That's you just don't know what's going on in the background, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's what I say to our guys. Like we have a very small window of a view on what's happening in that aircraft across its life. We're just seeing it for a small period of time. So just manage it properly while we're looking after it. Then we pass it on to somebody else. But like that, the regulator then is managing the full operation, the full AOC. There may be issues we've no awareness of, and which is none of our business. They're not going to discuss those with us, and may have nothing to do with us. So you might find some resistance, but it may have nothing to do with us, really, in that sense. And I don't envy the regulators' job, really, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the confidentiality thing, it's a bit of an issue, and you have to honor it. I mean, in some authorities, it's not such a big deal, but other authorities, like for instance, in an environment like Canada or the U.S., litigation is a big thing, right? So
Of course,
if we offer, as a transport inspector, if you were to allow something for one AOC holder but not for another without documented evidence as to why that's the case, you can be sued for unfair practices. You know, all kinds of things can come out. So you really have to be careful.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So about delegation, we touched already on this, but I would like to make a clear statement. So the ARC certification, let's call it like this, belongs of a person belongs to the company. It's issued to the company. While, for example, in case of the MDM, and I leave this for you to comment, it belongs to you. So whether you do a job for a company or another one, and you leave that company, it stays with you. And also the main thing is that you, in the case of the MDM, you are representing the government.
Actually, that brings up a good point too. So yeah, and I don't want to forget it, so I'll touch on this one first. So as a Transport Canada MDM, for instance, the MDM actually issues the C of A himself. Like if I were the MDM, it'll be my signature on the C of A. But you act as a civil aviation inspector on behalf of the Minister of Transport. And so as such, you're indemnified by the Government of Canada. Is there any kind of indemnification like that for an ARC holder, or is it you're
Company.
liable for your errors and emissions through the company? How does that work?
Yeah, interesting, Brett. We were just talking about this last week because we're bidding for some work, and it's becoming a bigger issue, really, insurance and liability. But yeah, I guess the individual is covered under the company's insurance, and then the contracts and the GTAs that we have in place with our clients then set out the insurance terms on that. So as an employee of our company, obviously the individual is covered, and all our ARCs are done by employees of the company. So it's boxed off in that sense, and the insurance covers there. But that issue does arise when we use contractors for other work, which is slightly separate. But for the purposes of ARC recommendations, only employees do it, and they're covered under the company insurance for the usual insurances, including and up to professional indemnity insurance as well if an error is made.
Right. Okay. Yeah, and as far as commenting on some of your aspects about MDM, so the Minister's Delegate Transport, there are two avenues that you can obtain delegation. One is through an organization. So, for instance, an AM maintenance provider can allocate some of its employees as minister's delegates, and they would go through a delegation process. Or a person, any licensed aircraft maintenance engineer, can make application for an independent delegation. The difference being, if you receive your delegation on behalf of the organization, if you leave that organization, you lose your delegation. Whereas if you make application as an independent, it's tied to myself, and I can go and issue a C of A to any aircraft for anybody, whether they're an AOC holder or whether they're a private individual. And I retain that so long as I maintain the conditions of its issuance, right? So that's a little different.
Similar to a DAR role as well.
Yeah, very
similar to that. Yeah.
Mike, I understand, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that an ARC, this ARC certification can be held by a CAMO, but also by a Part 145. They can have their own ARC personnel.
No, not really. No.
Okay.
No. You could have a combined organization as well, which would be
Okay, all
quite
right.
rare, but they're rare enough. Yeah, but that would be a part CAO, which is a combined organization. That's possible as well for smalls, maybe for flight schools or smaller organizations. But for in ours, it's part CAMO, or if you're an AOC, then you must have your CAMO in-house. There's no question about that. Now you can contract and subcontract out of that, but you have to hold the approval yourself as an AOC holder.
Okay. Okay. Oh, that's interesting.
Mhm.
So, another question: is there any differences in the ARC process for an aircraft, a transition aircraft, or a storage aircraft, or an operating aircraft, or it's all the same?
Oh, we use we cover operating aircraft. We have a contract with an airline here in Ireland to cover their ARC recommendations. And I must say it's a pleasure to do ARC recommendations on operating aircraft because everything is bang up to date. You know, it's
Right.
they're ready to go. The aircraft is in service. They need the aircraft back. There's no waiting around. It works like clockwork, you know. So we can there's no difference really in the process except that the product, if you like, is so much easier to do an operating aircraft. A transition aircraft is full of drama, you know, it's stuck someplace, it's just
You
a
don't
drama queen.
say.
That's it, you know, and it can take a long time, and there's so many parties involved, and you know, there's so much at play, and there's politics, and there's hustling, and there's all that goes with it. So it's much easier for us to do an operating aircraft than to do a transition aircraft for sure. But to be honest, the forms are exactly the same. The process is the same. You know, like recently I brought in an inspector out to an aircraft that was supposed to be ready. All I can say, Brett, is not alone was there not floorboards down, there was floor beams missing, you know, for an aircraft that was supposed to be ready, you know, like, and that doesn't happen with an operating aircraft. You know, an operating aircraft is ready to go, and much easier, much simpler process for us. But it is the same forms, the same procedure, the same physical inspection, but a much easier product with an operating aircraft than with a transition aircraft. You know, like some of the transition aircraft we've been involved with recently have gone on for really extended periods. You know, I'm talking years now. You know, we have two aircraft that we've recently returned to service from that were ex-Russian aircraft, and you know they've gone on for years. Let's be honest, not months now, but years. So they've been very protracted projects. So,
So during the years that these projects are going on, is the continuing airworthiness being managed, or is it everything's been stopped and then you have to recover?
yeah, well, in this case, we had two aircraft that were grounded in February 24, was it 22? They were grounded in 22. So then they at the outbreak of the war, basically in Ukraine. When was that? February 22. The years are flying by now. So no, so those aircraft one was grounded in Amsterdam and one was in Munich, and they basically, because of the sanctions that were imposed, they were untouched for a long period of time. So when the owner got possession of the aircraft, you know, at least 2 years had transpired, and that was 2 years of aircraft untouched, no maintenance, nothing. And so basically, we had no records and we had no maintenance from the time they were grounded. So basically, the aircraft were on the Bermuda register, as a lot of the Russian aircraft were on the Bermuda register. So we went back to the last C of A application for those aircraft, and we got the Bermuda shared that information with us. So we got a starting point, a clean starting point, which happened to be the November before they were grounded. Like, so they were grounded in February, and we got the statuses from the previous November. So now we had a starting point with the aircraft. So then we contacted Airbus And needless to say, they take a dim view of their aircraft being ignored for such a long period of time. And we did discover that 2 years is kind of the threshold of tolerance of, ignoring something. So there's a document then called an AMPERS F that you complete. So basically, this is a magic Excel spreadsheet that contains all of the MPD tasks, and basically you complete that form showing when you think the last when this task was last performed, when it was next due, so you're establishing what the delta is now between what you know was performed and what you're missing. So you send that into Airbus, and then they come back with a work pack for you. And I can tell you, it's a pretty big work pack when that comes back. So that goes through all the 88 chapters, and they come back with a hefty block of work. Look, the challenge then is really these aircraft were at locations where that work wasn't possible, so we had to get them moved then to locations where we could do the maintenance, and so that was pretty challenging. On top of that, we had no records, so we had to rebuild the records because the records were released out of Moscow. So eventually, the aircraft were put back into service. We got them off the Bermuda register, we put them on the Austrian register, and now they've just gone into service in China. So, but that has been a long project, about a 2-year project. But we've spoke to somebody recently. It's very challenging. These Russian aircraft are going to be extremely challenging because there's so much sanctions attached to them, that at every level that you try to move something, whether it be ground handling, storage, customs, components, parts, fuel, you name it, everywhere you turn, you're going to come up against challenges, because somebody will say, this is a sanctioned aircraft, how am I allowed to do this? And not alone are you getting into the regulator, the authority, but the government permission as well. So government don't want to be seen to be complicit in, we can't breach the sanctions basically, and they're going to be these aircraft will be very restricted in the future, so. And there's a lot of them, about 750 of them.
Yeah, even people like the type certificate holders are leery about touching any of these, and for good reason, because if anybody's found to be violating the sanctions, then that could have a huge impact on their business, right?
Of course.
So why would you jeopardize that over one airplane? So,
yeah.
So you guys manage. You said you have different approvals from different authorities. So you manage aircraft registered under different authorities. Do you see any similarities with the ARC process in the EASA into other authorities like UK overseas territories or to REG? Do they have something similar?
I suppose the ARC is unique enough to EASA. To be fair, it is a unique enough process. I don't think you could complicate. The other authorities have managed to complicate their process as much as the ARC. It's got really complicated, and we work on this all the time. We end up second guessing ourselves with it sometimes. It's got so complex, and we're doing it ourselves all the time. No, I don't think anybody has managed to complicate it as much as EASA have. I really like the OTAR system. I like that the AAR report is really nice. It's more holistic for the aircraft. You're looking for a history. You're looking for the background. Whereas like when we make the ARC recommendation on an aircraft that has been grounded for 2 years, there's nowhere on that form that we say that. Like we say, here's the AD status, here's the CRS. It didn't say anywhere on the form that this thing has been grounded for 2 years. It's very interesting. Whereas the AAR report, you have to tell the story. You have to tell. You can't leave that out. So sometimes forms don't allow for that amount of information on it, and it is very interesting because I remember looking at the because we made an ARC recommendation on the aircraft that were grounded for that period of time, and nowhere on the ARC recommendation form did it say the aircraft had been grounded for that period of time.
I find that quite interesting because technically that's a damaged aircraft, and most state authorities have a requirement where if you're going to resurrect a damaged aircraft, the authority has to be involved. The client has to present a plan on how they plan on restoring that aircraft. And the only way you can understand whether that plan is valid or not is understanding how did it get damaged, where did it get damaged, what's the situation? Is it somewhere where maintenance can even take place, right? So you need all of that information.
Yeah,
You need
and I guess,
storyline.
Brett, to be fair, I mean, they were fully informed. You know, the authority were fully informed. They were well aware of the situation. I mean, these were practically in the news. These aircraft, you know, it was well known. But it's interesting that the actual form that was submitted didn't contain the information. And historically, when that's reviewed in 2 years' time, nobody will remember it. You know, like so, it wasn't there.
If it's not recorded, it didn't happen.
Yes,
right?
that's right. Yeah. So, but it is very interesting. But you know, we spoke to a customer recently who has another aircraft grounded in Europe of similar vintage, and after reviewing the risk to them, you know, they were about to buy this aircraft. They reviewed the risk and they said, no, it's not worth it. It's too risky. And it's probably not possible. So to your point, it's going to be extremely difficult to do it. And it will be expensive, you know, it will be extremely expensive, because really you're looking at the full MPD being thrown at an aircraft, basically, you know, to clean it up. And they're now getting beyond that. 2 years is probably the tolerance from Airbus on a task, really. You know, you're beyond 2 years, yeah, anything, you know, they can't really stand over a task, really, you know.
This reminds me of something. I saw an aircraft once that they had installed some parts that were removed serviceable off another aircraft, both on the same register. But interestingly, the one that was being robbed for parts hadn't flown for 3 years. And you know, you have to take all of these pieces into consideration, right? So.
Yeah. It's and sometimes, like, you know, it's like I remember you know, getting back to what we spoke about earlier, working in the quality department in an airline, and one of my areas of responsibility was allowing extensions on deferred defects. You know, so I was very familiar with the MEL, and like one of the things that people forget with the MEL is that any allowance or forgiveness that you're allowed in the MEL is on the condition that everything else works. You can't accumulate a defect from every chapter. You know, you can't have one of each. It's on the presumption that everything else is working. You know,
the interrelation of defects has to be assessed.
Exactly. Yeah. So you know, you can't have, you know. And I remember the issue came up about it was in an aircraft that was flying with an APU in op, all right, which was allowed, and then one generator on one side was down, and so that's allowed. But the problem is you can't have both together, you know. So you can have one or the other, but not both, you know. But it's conditional on the system working, you know.
Interestingly, I came across a similar situation where this aircraft had a generator unserviceable, and you could have a generator unserviceable if the APU was serviceable. But there was an AD against the APU stating that there was a problem with the containment and with the box, and that you cannot operate it in flight. So now the MEL kind of goes out the window.
Yes,
but the pilots I spoke to at the time, they weren't even aware of it. So
right.
But yeah, it is. Yeah, it is interesting for sure. Yeah, but again, you know, are you reading the manuals to make something happen, or are you reading the manuals to prevent something from happening? You know, so
yeah, exactly.
It's the interpretation. It's the interpretation for sure.
For sure.
Yeah. So, Mike, we are approaching the end of our interview. I would like to ask you a couple of questions. So, what is or are the issues that you see in aviation nowadays, and what is needed to solve them?
Yeah, I guess I suppose one of the big problems we're seeing at the moment is, you know, the shortage of operating aircraft we've heard of different estimates, but one of the best estimates at the moment is that the industry is missing about 5,000 aircraft. That there's that many, that the increased demand for travel and the reduction in the production of aircraft and the availability of aircraft has meant that we've got this gap of aircraft. So operators that have operating aircraft are extending their leases. They're not handing them back. And that's our work basically, is the returns. So we're not seeing those. So work is certainly the availability of transition aircraft has dramatically reduced. So we'd like to see that increase. Now we've always had enough. We've had some of those very big projects that we referred to earlier that have kept us busy throughout that period. But we really need to see the aircraft returning in the next 6 months and get back to the normal redelivery schedule that the leasing companies have had, where they look at 10% of their fleet coming back each year. That's we need those numbers rather than the story of everything is extending. So I think the extensions have happened, and now the extensions are starting to run out again. So the leasing companies want their aircraft back. The other challenge is that those aircraft that are coming back are going in for teardown and harvesting of engines, because the engine issue then, of course, means that there's such a shortage of engines. So there's people buying aircraft in now just to harvest the engines off, and they're not investing in the maintenance to return the aircraft to service. So I suppose we're seeing that as that's the biggest challenge for us at the moment, is a kind of a line of sight of work that we need to see aircraft coming back, and that's our biggest concern, I suppose.
For sure.
Is there anything that you would have liked to know about your job and your career that nobody told you?
That's a very interesting. That's a very interesting question. I don't know. I think it's the one thing that I'm always fascinated with is that you meet great people in the industry. I would safely say there's very few bad eggs in aviation. There is the odd one here. Well, you meet great people in the industry. It's that's the one thing that surprised me most, I suppose, is no matter where you go, people are doing the same. Wherever you travel in the world, people are doing the same job. They're looking for the same results. They have the same commitment to the aircraft, the training. We're all basically doing the same thing. I suppose that's the one thing that I didn't realize that I've learned over time. And I suppose we recruit people that are probably in the same frame of mind. You meet people, we're broadly similar. That community of people has always surprised me, And I say that you don't. There's very few villains in the industry, really. I think there are a few, but not too many.
Well, yeah, I've seen a few.
Yeah.
But by far, I think most people try to do the right thing. And a lot of findings, a lot of non-compliances, quite more often than not, come from not understanding or just overlooking something, right? But in relation to what you just said, I find it's, for an ever-growing industry, it's still a small world. I mean, I've been halfway around the world and run into people I knew when 30 years ago, right? So it's quite interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. As we said, it's a big world, a small industry. Yeah. For sure. But then I think people stick with it too, don't they?
It's a sickness,
you find
right?
people just won't leave. They won't leave.
Yeah, exactly.
What would you do?
Exactly. Yeah.
So, do you have any advice for those who are going to starting out in aviation, or this in a particular field of CAMO?
Well, yeah, I suppose the one thing I say about it is, as I say to my team, that even though we're dealing with aircraft, it's a people business as well. So no matter what business you're in, you're dealing with people all the time, and to bear that in mind, when in all their dealings, whether it is people to people business, and the customers trust us to look after. They don't. in some ways it's not really AerAdvise, the company name that they're giving the aircraft to us, to Mike to look after, and I'm giving it to John, and John is giving it to Joe, and there's a kind of a personal investment in that sense that it is a people to people business in that sense. It's not giving it to a company to look after. Say this, Brett will look after me here. If I need something, there's that personal commitment to the work that you do, and then and that's, I suppose, part of the industry, isn't it? That people trust people. There's a trust in the industry that you will do the right thing and you will look after it.
Yeah, I think this is the main difference between all these organizations. Like you said, we do a lot of the same things, but it's the way we do them that makes the difference, and that relies on the people involved in each company.
Oh yeah, and that's it. It's down to reputation as well. Then isn't it? That the you have to maintain that it has to be reputable. It's an industry of great trust as well.
Yeah.
We do need to trust each other. When we review documents or review records, it's unimaginable that they would be falsified, in some ways. But at the same time, you still have to be careful. Yeah.
It's unimaginable until you've actually seen it, and then unimaginable, then you can prove it.
Yeah. But exactly to that point, but you have to be aware that it's possible. But you think most people the vast majority of people are trying to do the right thing in the industry and do right by it. Yeah, for sure.
It brings to mind not falsifying documents, but when I first joined Transport Canada, I was warned about being wary of a certain aircraft manufacturer having more than one aircraft with the same data plate. And it wasn't 6 months into working there, I ran into 2 different aircraft with the same data plate.
Oh my goodness! Yeah.
It's
possible. It's possible.
It is.
Yeah.
So, Mike, where people can find more about you, about AerAdvise, if you want to share, website, LinkedIn.
Yes, we have a website, AerAdvise.com. We have our LinkedIn page that we probably should be more active on. We're planning to be more active on LinkedIn, and I think we see it's more and more difficult to promote the company by calling to customers and getting meetings. And I think people are more reluctant. There's a reluctance now for meetings, and when you think about it, then you can put that information into your customer's hand by putting it into their phone on LinkedIn. That's the obvious way of doing it, really, isn't it? So a lot easier to get reach through LinkedIn and good posts. But I think helpful posts and informative posts is the direction we'd like to go, rather than just say, "Oh, here I am, I'm great," trying to find a new angle and not a new angle, but something interesting to catch people's attention as well, to be interesting and informative as well, I suppose. There's a barrage of information coming through on LinkedIn, and then because we're never sure, what's directed to whom, I think our feeds are kind of profiled into us, aren't they? So, like, I get a lot of stuff about golf now on mine for some reason. I don't know. Somebody somewhere is talking.
Yeah.
I know. Well, it's all inherent in the internet now, right? I mean, you can't look at something you can't look at curtains for your house without all of a sudden starting to get advertisements for curtains.
Yes, even mention it, just to mention it, for sure.
Exactly.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, Mike, it has been a pleasure. It was an interview full of informations. I loved it. I really hope we can do another one on some other topics, because you are a wealth of knowledge.
I don't think so.
And you have a lot of funny stories, so I love that.
Okay. Brilliant. Alicia, take care. Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye for now.